Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We have finished our predictions for every FBS team in both the Power 5 and the Group of 5, and now we are going to give you our college football playoff predictions as well as our New Year's Six bowl game predictions. We are entering the 5th year of the college football playoff, but last year was one of the craziest by far as we saw two teams from the same conference get in, and of course that brought along the controversy between Alabama and Ohio State, with the Buckeyes being a two-loss team but winning their conference championship over an undefeated Wisconsin, while Alabama was just a one-loss team but didn't even play for their conference championship. But as we all know, Alabama got into the college football playoff as the number 4 seed and ended up winning the national championship over Georgia, the other SEC team. So it was a very wild year for the playoff, and the committee had some very difficult decisions to make. But this year, I think it will be a little bit easier for them. I think the playoff will be much more straightforward, not as much controversy. And yes, I'm predicting the playoff to look exactly the same as it was in 2016, right down to the seeds. I know a lot of people say that's unlikely or isn't going to happen, but it's very possible that this could be the way things shape up. I've got Alabama as the 1 seed, and I have them going undefeated this year. I really don't see any team in the regular season that is going to be able to beat them. Their toughest test probably going to be LSU and Auburn in the SEC West at least, but I've got them being the number 1 seed. At number 2, I've got Clemson also going undefeated, winning the ACC. I've got Alabama winning the SEC. As I said, Clemson or Alabama, they could switch spots depending on how things go, depending on how the committee feels about this. As long as they both go undefeated, I could very well see Clemson being the 1 seed and Alabama being the 2, but right now we're going to keep the Crimson Tide at number 1. I've got Ohio State at number 3 for now. Now, of course, if something comes out with Urban Meyer, if he is fired or something like that happens, maybe that will change things a little bit. We'll go back and reevaluate not only the playoffs that we have going on here, but also our Ohio State predictions. But right now, I assume Urban Meyer will be head coach of the Buckeyes, and we're going to keep Ohio State as a 3 seed there, also winning the Big Ten, I believe, with an 11-1 record in the regular season. Then I have Washington coming in at number 4, and it's very possible they could jump a spot, maybe get to the 3 seed. I have them winning the Pac-12, only losing 1 game this year. Tons of talent for this Huskies team, so I think they're good enough to once again make the playoff for the 2nd time in 3 years. And so I've got Alabama versus Washington in the Orange Bowl, Clemson versus Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, and then, of course, Alabama versus Clemson in the national championship game, meeting for the 4th time in a row in the college football playoffs. So that would be extremely exciting. That would be a heck of a national championship game. I mean, I know it's early. I would probably be picking Alabama in this game, but they would definitely have a tough test going up against a very, very difficult Clemson defense. Now, I know a lot of people think maybe Georgia could slip in there or somebody else because we've got a lot of teams that, could surprise us. We don't really know how the playoffs is going to shape up. We could have a really big dark horse that slips in there. We could have 2 teams from the same conference making it again. So Georgia, there is a possibility they could make the college football playoff. I think they're going to have to win the SEC championship, though, like they did last year. I had them going 11-1. I do not think they're going to go undefeated. It's possible. I think they're going to slip up somewhere, which is more likely going to set up a date between an undefeated Alabama and a 1-loss Georgia. So then you have the controversy once again. If Georgia beats Alabama, do Alabama and Georgia both get in? I think if Alabama beats Georgia, they're not going to let in a 2-loss Georgia team. They could, but I don't think so. But if Georgia beats Alabama, do you have 2 SEC teams in there once again? Does Washington or Ohio State or someone like that, do they get bumped out? So that's something the committee will have to discuss and figure out, and that could be where we have our controversy for this year, much like we did between Alabama and Ohio State last year. But right now, this is our projected playoff for the 2018-19 season. And then down here, we've got our projected New Year's Six bowl games, and these are obviously super difficult to predict. You never know how these things are going to work out. But right now, we're going to do our best job. We're doing our best job to predict these things, see how they play out over the course of the season. But we got the Rose Bowl between Wisconsin and Stanford. And, as we all know, the Rose Bowl, the tie-ins there are always Big Ten and Pac-12. Some people think maybe Notre Dame could go because they're going to have a solid year. I've got them pegged at 10-2, but would not be surprised to see them do better than that. But I'm going to keep it with Big Ten and Pac-12. And so I think Wisconsin's almost a given for the Rose Bowl if things play out. If they don't make the college football playoff, I think they're a lock for the Rose Bowl. I've got them making the Big Ten championship game, but losing to Ohio State. Wisconsin, I think I would have them with 2 losses after that loss to Ohio State. Obviously good enough as the Big Ten runner-up to make the Rose Bowl. Then I've got Stanford in the Pac-12, obviously the Pac-12 champion with Washington making the college football playoff. And I've got Stanford making this. I know you can make an argument for Oregon as well. I actually have Oregon ahead of Stanford in that division standings, but I'm going to take the Cardinal to go to the Rose Bowl here. Very well could be Oregon if they go 10-2 like I predict. but I think that's going to be a given there. Arizona is who I have losing to Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, but with that loss, the Wildcats would have 4 losses on the year. I don't see a 4-loss Arizona team, even though they make the Pac-12 championship game, do not see them making the Rose Bowl. And then I got the Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Oklahoma, and I know myself and everybody else would love to see a rematch between the Bulldogs and the Sooners after that thrilling Rose Bowl matchup in the college football playoff we saw last year. Obviously, the teams are a little different, but it would still be one heck of a game. Geographically, this game makes sense for Georgia and Oklahoma to meet up here in New Orleans. And really, this would really make sense. I've got Oklahoma winning the Big 12, and that would give them, with that Big 12 win, an 11-2 record on the year. And that's just not going to be good enough, I don't think, to get them in to the college football playoff. I think you've got to be a one-loss team to get in there, at least for Oklahoma's sake. Georgia, also a one-loss team in the regular season. I have them losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game, so that would be a 2-loss team, but the SEC runner-up, which would obviously pretty much give them a lock in the Sugar Bowl. So I think when the committee is selecting these teams, if this is the way the chips fall, I think it would be a no-brainer to match up Georgia and Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl. TV ratings would be huge. Attendance ratings would be huge. I know everybody would love to see a rematch between these two teams. And if everything falls away, I think it will. That would be one heck of a Sugar Bowl and probably will happen that way. You got the Fiesta Bowl here between Notre Dame and Boise State. Now, as I've said before, I could truly see Notre Dame doing better than what I have them projected. I've got them at 10-2. It's possible they could be 11-1, maybe even go undefeated. And if that's the case, they won't be in contention for the Fiesta Bowl. They'll be in contention for the college football playoff. But I've got them at 10-2. They're going to be playoff contenders pretty much all the way through the year. I've got them losing the season finale to USC, one that was a little bit iffy on. But I've got them making the Fiesta Bowl. I think this would be a fitting spot for them. They were in the Fiesta Bowl just a few years ago when they faced off against Ohio State. And I've got them playing Boise State. So, yes, that means I have Boise State being the highest-ranked Group of 5 champion that will make a New Year's Six Bowl. And I think this game's either going to be Boise State or Central Florida like it was last year. I have both teams going 10-2 in the regular season, both teams winning their conference championships. But I've got to go with Boise State here. It's going to be really just depend on how the committee looks at their strength of schedule for both the Knights and the Broncos, looking at how things are going for them. But we would all love to see some more Boise State magic in the Fiesta Bowl. We know what happened when they played Oklahoma many years ago. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2014, they beat Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl. So another matchup against a very historic program and another solid team in Notre Dame. I think that would be a very exciting game there. So I'm picking Boise State to go. Would not be surprised to see this be Central Florida or somebody like that. But right now I'm picking the Fighting Irish to face off against Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. That would be one heck of a game there. And then to close it out, the Peach Bowl between Miami and Penn State. And as we know, you get the Sugar Bowl is an SEC versus Big 12 matchup. The Rose Bowl is a Big 10 versus Pac-12 matchup. And the Fiesta and Peach Bowl is kind of a free-for-all. You've got your at-large teams, and one of those games is going to host your Group of 5 champions. So we're going with that Group of 5 going to the Fiesta Bowl. And the Peach Bowl, the two at-larges, Miami and Penn State. Miami I've got going 11-2 with that loss in the ACC championship game to Clemson. So obviously a fitting spot for them. It would make sense for them to go to the Orange Bowl, but Orange Bowl is hosting a college football playoff game this year. So Miami makes the Peach Bowl and goes up against Penn State, another at-large team who I have going 10-2. This would be a super intriguing game. Two great minds going at it between Mark Richt and James Franklin. Two pretty decent offenses also going up against each other. And I'd like to see Miami's defense go up against a solid quarterback in Trace McSorley. So I think this would be a really fun game to watch. It's very possible, though, that you could see, maybe not Penn State, you could see a Michigan State or somebody like that who I also have going 10-2 in the Big Ten. But I think those are your most reasonable options. Maybe if Michigan surprises us and does a little bit better than I have them projected, I think they have them at 9-3. Maybe they jump Penn State or Michigan State and slip in to the Peach Bowl or a New Year's Six Bowl. I know some people could say Texas, who I have being the runner-up in the Big 12 this season, but I just don't think they're going to be able to make a New Year's Six Bowl with 3 losses, including that loss in the Big 12 championship game. So I think more than likely you would see a Penn State or a Michigan State or somebody like that making one of these at-large bowl birds and more than likely playing Miami in the Peach Bowl. So this is our projected playoffs for the 2018-19 season. We've got Alabama and Clemson Part 4 with Alabama owning that series over the past couple of years, 2-1 over the Tigers. Maybe Clemson can even up the score in the national championship game. And then our projected New Year's Six bowl games. Obviously, it's very difficult to predict these games so early on in the season. It can go either way. It's all up to the committee because they do select these bowl games It's going to come down to how they rank them and how, the revenue, where the geographically. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into how they choose these New Year's Six bowl games. But I think these would be a solid slate of games for some of the biggest games of the year. I would watch every single one of these, and all of these I think have the potential to be some of the best bowl games of the year. So those are our projections for the 2018-19 season, but of course we're just going to have to wait. We are just 10 days away from the start of college football. So make sure you're getting ready, because when September 1st comes around, it's going to get real. That's going to get really exciting, and we're going to see how all this stuff plays out. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.